Okay, now we're going to learn how to knit a hat from start to finish. You can see that I already started and I was doing knit 2 stitches, purl 2 stitches, knit 2 stitches. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see that better. So you can see here, these are my knits, these are my purls. You don't have to do that, or you could do the entire hat like that. It's up to you. So just for, I'm doing what's called a ribbing on the edge, and mine's about 2 inches. So I'm going to factor that 2 inches into the size of my entire hat. So at this point, I am going to start with knitting an entire row and then purling an entire row. So I'm going to do what's called stockinette stitch. So I'm just going to stop doing that pattern that I was doing before, and I'm going to knit all the way across. When I get to the other side, I'm going to purl. Okay, so before we continue, I want to just point out how many stitches you should cast on determined by the size of your needle. I am using a size 8 needle, which is a fatter needle, so I have 80 stitches. The smaller your needle, the more stitches you're going to need to be able to get around the head. So how you determine the size of the needle is you look on the end here and it'll tell you the number. So this is just a general range. If you had 95 stitches with a 6, you'd probably be fine. Okay, so just a general range to get you going. So you have to cast on your stitches first and know depending on how your size of your needle is. I was just about finishing knitting this row. I had a couple more stitches, so I got to the point where I was knitting a row and now I'm going to purl a row. So when I turn around, I just want to make sure that we remember to bring the yarn down in the front. If we have the yarn going around the back, then we're going to see that possibly as 2 stitches. So you always want to bring that yarn into the front before you start to purl, and then we can continue to purl across. Okay, so I'm going to continue to work where I purl a row, knit a row, purl a row, knit a row, and we'll check back with the length of the hat in a little bit. Okay, so I did a little bit more here, and I'm at about 4 inches finished. You can see, widen this a little bit, you can see where my edging stops and the stockinette starts. So this is my good side, this is the knit side, and this is my purl side, that's the back. So I'm probably going to continue working in stockinette until I reach about 6 inches. At that point, then I think I'm going to start to decrease, so then I'll take you through how to do that. So I'm going to continue working on this, knit a row, purl a row, that's all I'm doing at this point until I get to 6 inches. Okay, so I continued to knit and purl, do my stockinette stitch, and my work is about 6 inches. So I'm ready to start decreasing. So before we do that, let's look at the directions as to how to understand what I'm going to do. When you decrease in knitting, it's written K2 tog, knit 2 together. That means you're going to knit 2 stitches together at the same time. So those 2 stitches are going to become 1 in the next row. So how we're going to decrease is we're going to start with 8. So we're going to knit 8 individual stitches, and then we're going to knit 2 stitches together. And the asterisks mean that we repeat that all the way across the row. Then when we turn around, we're just going to purl normal. Then we're going to knit 7 stitches, knit 2 together all the way across. And then we turn around and we purl. Now I'm purling. If you're not doing a knit a row, purl a row, if you're just doing knit, 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 then this would become a knit. In my written directions in Schoology, it says that. Alright, so but I'm purling on the other side. So then after that, I knit 6, and I knit 2 together all the way across. So I'm getting less and less stitches. Purl on the other side. knit 5, knit 2 together all the way across. So I'm repeating this across. So it would be knit 5, knit 2 together, knit 5, knit 2 together, purl across. And I continue that sequence, knit 4, knit 2 together all the way across, purl. Knit 3, knit 2 together all the way across, purl. Knit 2, knit 2 together, knit 1, knit 2 together, until I get down to knit 2 together all the way across. So by then I should only have about 6 to 8 stitches. So let me show you how that's done. So we're going to start with the 8. So I'm going to knit 8 individual stitches. You only decrease on your knit side. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so to knit 2 together, instead of putting the needle under there, I'm going to put it under both of these. So I'm just going to kind of get it caught underneath both stitches, and then I'm going to knit those through. Okay, now I'm going to knit 8 again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I'm going to knit 2 together. Get my needle in underneath both of them and bring it through. Oops. So we're going to continue this all the way across. And now I'm ready to knit 2 together again. Okay, so I'm going to continue doing that, knitting 8, knit 2 together, knitting 8, then I'm going to purl the next row. Then I'm going to go on to knit 7, knit 2 together, and I'm going to get it down a little bit smaller before I come back to you. Okay, so you can see how my hat is starting to take shape, and if I zoom in right here, you can actually see where the decrease happens. That's where I'm knitting those 2 stitches together. So so far I've done 8 knit 2 together, the 7, the 6, the 5, 4, and 3. I just purled across. So now I have a few rows left to do, knit 2 together, or knit 2 stitches, knit 2 together. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so we're just going to knit 2, and it's going to decrease really fast now because every 3 stitches we are losing 1. So knit 2 stitches, knit 2 together. Knit 2, oh, there's a good way for me to show you. I just dropped a stitch. Hold on. That'll be another video, how to fix that. Okay, knit 2, there we go, knit 2 together, knit 2, knit 2 together, and I continue that across just like before. 2 individuals and then 2 together. And a couple of times I had some leftover stitches, so if that happens in a row, just knit them together. Just knit them normal. Alright, so now I'm going to purl, flip it around, and I'm just going to do my normal purl row, And again, if you are just knitting and not knitting and purling, this would be a knit row. It's really your choice in the pattern. So we pretty much have like two more rows to do, and then we're ready to start to sew the hat together. Okay, so on this one, now I'm going to knit one stitch, knit two together. So it's going to lose a lot more stitches too. Knit one, knit two together, knit one, knit two together. You should be almost out of stitches by the time you get to the last decrease. Alright, so now I'm going to purl, and then we're going to knit two together all the way across. Okay, so this should be our last decrease. Let's see how many stitches we have at the end. So now I'm going to knit two together all the way across. If you find that you have too many at the end, you can always do this row one more time. I'll probably have about 8 stitches, which is fine to end with. Okay, so I ended up with 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 stitches. Alright, so now I'm ready to take this off the needle. Sometimes you cast off. In this situation, we're not going to do that. We're going to take a really long piece of yarn that's attached, I'm just going to grab that, and I'm going to cut it kind of long because I'm going to use this to sew my hat together. So first, I'm going to take the end and thread it through the eye of the needle. I'm using a large needle. This is actually made for yarn, and I'm going to turn this around because I'm right-handed, and I'm going to take my needle, and each one of these stitches I'm going to pull off of the knitting needle and put it onto my needle, and just kind of thread my needle through there and get each stitch onto the sewing needle. If you want to, you can pull this so that they don't fall off the edge. And just get all of them on, and then we don't need the knitting needles anymore. We're just going to pull this, and that's going to come together. And that's the top of the hat. So now we're going to turn it inside out, and starting at the top of the hat, we're going to kind of unroll this a little bit and pull that tight, and I'm going to grab one stitch on one side, and then I'm going to grab the one that's right next to it and bring it back across. So you want to do it very close together. So this stitch next, and then right there. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit closer. And then we're coming back, so we just catch that little loop. And it's really important to make sure that you catch them all as you come down, because you don't want there to be any holes. So this is a little bit longer than I need. And it's also really important that I did a little border edge that when I get down there, I want to make sure that that lines up when I get to sew that together. So I got to think about that when I'm coming down. You also don't want your hat not to meet on the bottom. So you want to make sure it lines up. Alright, so I'm going to continue to sew this together, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I sewed all the way down. Now I'm lining up my edge here, my ribbing, and I just have a few more stitches to go. So still catching one side and then the other. And you just want to make sure that your edge is even when you get down there. Just catch that last one. Okay, so now once I have the hat sewn together, I don't want to just cut this off because the entire thing will unravel. So I'm going to just go back up a few inches with my needle just to kind of lock that stitch in. Kind of the same effect as we did on the sewing machine when you backed up, so that this is not going to unravel because we're going in two different directions. And I'm even going to do a couple going down again. If you do that, it is not going to come apart. Okay, so now I can cut this off. And I also have to weave in the tail that we started from. This was the excess that we had when we cast on the stitches. So I'm just going to weave that up into that seam. And it also reinforces that, so that that's the area that you pull on to put the hat on. So it'll also help to keep that from coming apart more. It'll give it a little bit more stability. Alright, so again, I'm just going to go in the same direction and then come back a little bit. And then I can cut that off. Alright, this was inside out, remember? So here is our finished hat. Here's our decreases nicely lining up around there. The seam goes down the back, so you really don't even notice it. And if you wanted to add a pom-pom to this, you could use the other video, just like before, and make your pom-pom. So good luck with it, have fun, and go for it.